Welcome to the September 2022 online LAPPG meeting. Thank you so much for being here. We're so thrilled. We're going to have Mike Rozett here with us, showing us what's new in RX10, and it just released yesterday. It's been, I think iZotope was last here in October of last year with RX9. So they've been working fast and furious, 11 months, and they have RX10 out. And Woody and I have been excited for this release. Woody, are you there? Trying to see if he's there. He is. There you are. So
I'm here.
You use
virtually.
You actually, true. You basically live and die with RX. I mean, you use it every single day, all day long, pretty much. So my question to you is there anything specific that you've been looking forward to in RX10? Are you gonna take it all in? Is there anything you're hoping that's
well,
gonna be
I'm looking forward to what Mike's going to tell us, but I have watched the little teaser video that they dropped the other day, and I'm looking forward to the improvements to the Spectral Recovery, which is a very useful module inside of it, and also the text functions is very, very interesting. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Mike has to say. But yes, I've been using this all the time. In fact, I had a doc on CNN, No Ordinary Life, which was mostly because it was about 5 female camera people. It was mostly a camera mic, and so everything else was created, and whatever came off that camera mic got a lot of RX love.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I am going to welcome Mike Rozett, who is the product manager of RX. Welcome, Mike. You look pretty well, pretty rested for a guy who just launched a huge project. How are you doing?
Thanks, Wendy. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a big release, and by the time we get to the end, everybody's pretty exhausted. So as I mentioned to you previously, I'm going to be disappearing for about a week to recover, but super excited to be here and talk about what we did for RX10.
Awesome. All right. Well, I am going to hop off, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Wendy, and thanks, Woody. I'm pretty much going to just jump right into a demo. But before I do that, just wanted to mention again that I'm the principal product manager at iZotope for RX. And I've been here, or been there, I should say, for about 5.5 years. Started with RX6. And now, as of yesterday, as Wendy mentioned, RX10 is out and in the market. I'm guessing there's probably going to be some questions at some point about pricing and cross grades and upgrades. Let me do a very quick thing and say the easiest way to get the best information on that, if we haven't already probably bombarded you with emails, so I will apologize in advance because there's usually a ton that come out during the launch. But if you've already sort of joined the iZotope family, you should be receiving emails from us about new releases and stuff. And usually in those or a link from them brings you over to sort of what the discount structure is for existing users. We're at the point now where we're tending to release RX annually, so once a year, and trying to do fairly substantial releases each time. And so those, to be clear, count as basically new versions of the product. So those are ones that you do need to pay for. But again, if you purchased from us before, there's all kinds of sort of discount structure. And if you need some more information, go to iZotope.com, go directly there, and you won't miss the big signs for RX10 on the homepage, and that can help lead you to, again, to pricing and so forth. So I'll take some questions on that, but generally speaking, I hope we've done our job and sent information out your way already. So I think with that said, I'm going to just take a couple seconds here just to get set up to share and go right into the demo. I also wanted to mention that, just one sec, and there we go. I also wanted to mention that I'm going to demo the features in advanced. So that's the most expensive product that we do, as all of you probably know, and that's where we put everything we make in. The version that is lower in price and smaller in terms of features, as you probably know, is standard. And then our very entry-level product is called RX Elements. Again, most of you probably know this. We made a change to RX Elements this year. So RX Elements is only plugins. So there's no longer the standalone app in RX Elements. But standard and advanced both still have the standalone plugin and a bunch of new features. And last thing I'll say on the sort of marketing side is we do have lists of which features are in which of the three products, Elements versus Standard versus Advanced. So those are on the website too. And you can just do a literal ABC comparison against the three and look for the one that, the version that's best for you. So I want to jump in now with something that's brand new for us. It's a feature we're calling text navigation with multiple speaker detection. And this is totally new for us, as I mentioned, and it's something that we're pretty excited about. It's also our first version, so it will continue to advance over time. But if you'll notice now at the bottom of the screen, bottom, I should say, of the main window, we now have a button that brings up what we call a word lane, a text navigation word lane. So I'm going to click it now. And what it does is, I've preloaded this sample to save some time, but what it does is it runs in 7 to 9 times real time, sort of in the background if you've got other things going on, and it converts dialogue, speech, and voiceovers to text. Couple limitations with this first version. It's only doing this in English, and it's been trained on a model that studied American English. So sometimes if you are trying to detect the speech of somebody with a British accent, for example, that's not an American accent, or if you had multiple speakers, for example, we've done some testing, and if you have 2 different British speakers, sometimes it doesn't pick that up as well. So we're really optimized for, again, American English, and it tends to work best in situations that don't have a ton of background noise. So if you've done an interview with a British, someone with a British accent in the New York subway, for example, you're probably going to see text transcription struggle a bit. So in this case, as I mentioned, I've already loaded this in, and this is your button again to turn on and off the transcription. And once it's loaded, it has the ability for you to zoom in. So I'm just going to use the keys to zoom in. I'm using just the plus sign. And you can get down to the word level. And then once you're at that word level, if you really want to drill in and see what's going on with your transcript, or listen and see what's going on, you can just play and bring it through.
It will limit your furniture strategy.
Right. I mean,
So you can see right away that there's 2 different colors, and that is another feature we built, and that's the multiple speaker detection. So back down here next to that new button for the word transcription, we have a pane that comes up that matches up the color of the speakers we've identified with a basic naming scheme. So the first color that comes up is blue, that becomes speaker 1. The second color we have is orange, that becomes speaker 2. We can detect up to 8 speakers, and they will appear here on the left-hand side. And then what's kind of cool about that feature is if you click on a speaker, it will bring up, and let me zoom out a little bit, it'll bring up every instance of that speaker in highlight form. So that way, if there was processing you wanted to target to that particular speaker that was different, for example, from processing you wanted to target to speaker 2, you could do that. And so that's kind of something, as I mentioned earlier, we're always looking to kind of what we'll do next and where we'll expand on, but we're trying to get these pillars in place so that you can get text transcription. And then after the text transcription runs, we've got multiple speaker detection running very, very quickly after that to then give you 2 things. Here's what your text is, and here are the speakers that are saying it. So with these speakers, if you double click on one, you can rename it. So you can name it whatever is relevant and useful to you in the particular project that you're working on. And then just jumping back to the text itself, if you are zoomed in, you can sort of select a word at a time. And so if you wanted to target processing for a word, or you wanted to cut and paste that word somewhere else or remove it, you could do that pretty easily and use the text as a guide. We're being very intentional, and we call this text navigation because we're not trying to be a speech transcription service. And part of the reason for that is we're always going to be beaten by folks that are doing that work in the cloud, because the cloud allows you to have obviously many more computers running in the background. You can update it more frequently. You can do all kinds of things in the cloud that you cannot do locally on the desktop. So why did we pick, or to be really honest, why did I pick the desktop? Because a lot of our professional users have major internet restrictions in their facilities. I'm assuming some of you all do as well. But that's been an issue for us in times that we wanted to maybe push something towards the cloud. Folks have said, if you do that, you're explicitly leaving me behind. I can't do that. So our first version of this is to have something on the cloud that's local, have something local and not on the cloud that allows folks to be able to use this in any setting that they're in. And then if I'm sort of cheating where we might be going down the road, I'd also like to see if we can potentially at some point down the road build in a cloud connection too. And that way we can serve folks in both situations. But for now, this is a desktop only version. Just to continue with a little bit of the user interface here, you can click on a word if you want to re-edit it so that it's more accurate. So you can see here, strategy was caught phonically properly, but not it was not spelled correctly. So if I wanted to click on here and retype that to strategy, or if there was sometimes like a proper name, somebody's name is not read well because it's a little bit confused by a particular name, often a name that's non-English, you could go up here and you could edit as you see fit. Another thing to talk about with this is the search function that we have. So up here, there's a search box, and this is, at the moment, it's really just a single word search. It's not really doing phrases yet. But for example, if there was a word, a keyword that you were looking for, or there was a word that maybe somebody said in an earlier take in a way that is not acceptable, a flub line, let's say, or just a bad read, you could enter a term into the search and then see how many times it comes up. And so I've got the word dark here. I can jump to this one here. Now, if I wanted to, if I like this word better, this read better, I could just copy it, jump back to dark, delete the previous version, and then just paste it and insert it right here. And you could do some very quick editing there. Again, we're not trying to pretend that we're a full-fledged DAW, but if you were doing some cleanup on the fly, or you had something that was sort of egregious that you wanted to clean right up before maybe you take it to your favorite DAW of choice, you could do that. So you'll notice dark came up twice, but then the word day is here. And you're thinking probably, well, why did that word come up? I don't understand. That doesn't make sense. The reason that word came up is because the search we're using is a fuzzy search. And a fuzzy search first looks for exact matches of the word. Then it looks for words that are close to it. So if the word darkness was in here, it probably would have identified that next. And then it looks to a level of words that have one letter different, in this case, one letter different from dark. And then it looks for maybe words that are two letters different from dark. And so you'll see words that often come up that are not the same words, but in terms of a fuzzy search, they're related. That's important because if the speech to text misses a word or misspells it or is close but not quite there in the spelling, the fuzzy search helps you track those words down, and then you can jump to them. And if you want to, again, correct them in your transcript, you can do that. But it helps you find alternates to the word you're looking at, as well as misspellings of the word that you're looking at. Things can get misspelled just because of the accuracy or inaccuracy of the technology here, but also people don't, as you all well know, don't always speak clearly. They don't always finish the end of a word. There's slang, there's things that get dropped out. So this helps you just navigate, again, text navigation, right? It helps you get where you're going with the transcription. There's also one thing I wanted to mention too around this feature, that if you, for some reason, wanted to rescan it, maybe you've chopped out a big section of it, or you're feeling like, I'm going to add something to this and I want to get another read on it. Any one of these words triggers a rescan. So if I go up and hit Control mouse on this, I can rescan the word lane, and I'll do that. But I want to show you something when I do that. Up here is a little button that releases a little bit of information. And so when you first show up with your text file and you load it in, maybe you've got a 60-minute file, right? So we're going to run it 7 to 9 times real time, but that's still going to take some time. So these words at the top in the word lane will start to propagate, but you may not want to sit around and watch that or scroll to the end to see how you're doing. So if you click the iZotope logo, it brings up a box that tracks status. So now if I go back and say, hey, you know what, I want to rescan this, maybe I've made some changes to it. Let me go back to Control, rescan word lane. I'll click that. Now watch what happens in the top right. It starts to indicate that the transcription function is running. And this is a short sample, so it'll be quick. Now it's looking for speakers. And this is a good way for you to check in periodically, because lots of you will be under time pressures and you'll be like, okay, I want to use this feature, but I need a read on when this thing's going to be done. Clicking this on and off gives you a sense of that. It also allows you to pause if for some reason you don't want to use up any CPU and you need to stop and jump onto something else. Maybe you have something come flying across your desk and you need to switch gears. You can do that. You can also cancel the process out. So that's pretty much, I'm just trying to make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, that's pretty much text navigation with built-in automatic multiple speaker detection. And I'm gonna, yeah, go ahead.
Mike, two quick questions, but I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you want to finish what you were saying?
No, I actually was literally winding up to say, I think I've covered it. Are there any questions? So this is a perfect time.
Cool. Great. Okay, we have Ken Polk, who is asking, can you change or select the color coding of the speakers in the text navigation?
No, not yet. We have pretty much mapped up the colors to the speakers as kind of a given thing.
Okay.
I'm glad you raised that, because it has been something that people have talked to us about, having some more options. And it's probably something we'll play around with a little bit down the road. But for now, it's pretty locked in from the automatic processing.
Got it. Okay. And then anonymous attendee asks, the blue dot indicates speaker 1. Where is that shown in the timeline?
Let me go back. The only place it's really shown, let me see if I can show this by this way. It's going to show up really in 2 ways. When you are looking up at the top in the word lane and you see the different colors, that's really that's the indicator for the different speakers. And then, as I mentioned before, when you want to choose everything from a speaker, so I'm getting blocked here, one sec. You can just click here, and then it will bring everything up under that. So you've got the color code around, the tab structure is color coded to match the speaker, and then it allows you to select all the selections from a speaker. That's about all we've got for that at this point.
Okay. And one thing about you guys that I know is you really listen to your users. So you guys are really receptive and stuff. So and I love that about you. Another question is, can you split speakers in different tracks?
Great question. That's coming. We don't have that yet. There's been sort of 2 requests around that. One of them is, can you just export a transcript? And we're probably going to pick up that functionality in a patch. We don't have that yet. And we don't have splitting. For example, if you want to take all of speaker 1 and split that into a tab, or get it in an export way and send it back to Pro Tools, we're going to be working on that. We don't have that yet, but it's a great request. And it's actually come up sort of towards the end of the project and some of our testing that's definitely something we want to do down the road.
Okay, great. All right. I think that was it for this particular part, this module. So,
okay, cool. Thanks, Wendy. So I'm going to jump over to the next sort of big thing we have in here. Those of you who've been with us for a few versions know that we have a feature called Repair Assistant, which you can just activate at the top right of the window. And we created that as a way to allow people to get hopefully very respectable processing results quickly for their particular set of, or their particular piece of audio. It's also something that has helped people who are less familiar with RX be able to get results quickly and frankly learn from it. On the pro side, a lot of you folks are the kinds of folks that are probably really comfortable just kind of doing your own thing, and you may not be interested in assistive tech. But I want to kind of have you take another look at it, because our first version was, I think, solid, but it wasn't amazing. And I feel like with the second version, we're pretty much close. I'll say we're closer to amazing. You all will judge us on that. So let me sort of do this setup. So you've gotten a piece of audio. Let me just play this, cue this.
Never saw my father or my mother, and never saw any likeness of either of them, for their days were long before the days of photographs.
So we've got, kind of a voiceover or a read here. And all of you who are pretty familiar with this will immediately have heard and can see that we've got some bands of hum going across, some buzzy sounds. We've got some broadband background noise going on. Maybe there's a few, S's that are coming along a little strongly. So with the new version of Repair Assistant, we've rebuilt this truly from the ground up. And what it does now, far better than the first version, is we've got a new bit of processing that we call selective learning. And what that does is it runs a quick process, a learning process to analyze everything that's in the audio. And it kind of does it in a linear manner, looking for, I'm not going to get the exact order right, but it will look for things like hums and buzzes and S's and some of the things you see here, and also a few things that are under the hood. And it will come up with basically a suggestion of what this software thinks you should do to make your audio sound better. And so I'll run it in just a moment, but I want to give a couple of pointers on how to use this. So we've got 4 modes in Repair Assistant. This first one, which is already pre-selected, is processing for voice, which is spoken word, dialogue, voiceovers, audiobooks, and vocals. And that's what you would want to select first before you learn the audio and come up with a profile. So you always have to pick your mode first. So that's the one first in the list, voice and vocals. Then we have one that brings up musical instruments. And this is really for tonal instruments. So think of things like guitars, strings, keys. We needed to distinguish those from percussion because often with percussion, you'll get really sharp transients, like imagine a snare hit or even a crash on a cymbal. And if you're trying to run processing that is looking for transients as a bad thing, it will come in and it will butcher percussion. It'll just do all the wrong things to it. So we realized that we wanted to split out musical instruments and percussion because we'd be able to get substantially better on performance on percussion if we made it its own category. And then the fourth category here is sound effects, or sort of, you can use it for ambience too. You can see that some of the processing changes. We have a sort of a deharsh setting, which is really playing along with basic EQ or working along with basic EQ. When we get back to the voice area, we're emphasizing things like de-essing and de-clicking, and there's also de-reverb. There's general sort of denoising in the background, and we're always running kind of an automated de-hum pass in the background of everything, because hum is one of those things that's pretty universal and pretty easy to characterize. And with our latest processing in de-hum from last year's version and some improvements this year, we can really run a pretty amazing automatic pass on that. So with all of that set up, we have our audio, we know it's voice, so I've already selected that mode. And so literally what you would do is open Repair Assistant, you have to know what your audio is, pick your mode, and then click Learn. And so now we're training Repair Assistant, we're doing that selective learning under the hood. And now it's got a profile in there that you can hear by going to preview. So I'm going to go right to preview and hear the cleaned up version, then I'll bypass to hear previous version, the uncleaned up. So here we are with the cleaned up.
As I never saw my father or my mother, and never saw any likeness of either of them, for their days were long before the days of photographs.
Okay, and bypass.
As I never saw my father or my mother, and never saw any likeness of either of them, for their days were long before the days of photographs. As I never saw my father.
So what it did right away is go after the hum. It went after that background noise, and it did a little bit of de-essing. And you can see what it set because the parameters show up here. And so the processing put, de-essing at about 14%. There's a little bit of de-reverbing on the room, and there's some de-click running. So if you want to now tweak, go back into preview mode, and you can play with, let's just start with the basic denoise feature. So we were back in preview.
As I never saw my father or my mother, and never saw any likeness of either of them, for their days were long before the days of photographs. As I never saw my father or my mother, and never saw any likeness of either of them, for their days were long before the days of photographs. As I never saw my father or my mother, and never saw. There is a decent recording. Sometimes folks will feel like we've gone a little bit light, which I'd rather we do with our initial processing than go too heavy. So you can boost that up. And then if you're still in preview mode, you can solo and listen to what we're doing and make more fine-tuned decisions. So I'll jump back into preview and go over to de-click. As I never saw my father or my mother, and never.
So you're hearing just the clicking noises. And let me do something radical here just for demo purposes. I'll push this really high. And now as soon as you start getting that chirpy sound, that little, I don't know, gerbily sound, gibberish sound, you're beginning to pull out some of the tonal qualities of speech, which is a big no-no because you're going to really mangle the speech. So you want to pull it back so you're really just focused on clicking. You only hear those bizarro, in this context, sounding clicking sounds. And once you do that, you're good to go with that one. And maybe you want to jump over to DS.
For their days were.
So let's get wacky with the S for a sec, just for demo purposes.
And never saw any likeness.
And there's the voice, right? So I've gone way too far. So I want to back that off and just get to the hisses. And if I like that, you know, I can.
As I never saw my father or my
commit to
mother,
it.
and never saw any likeness of either of them, for their days were
So that's
long.
pretty respectable. And if I like that at that point, or actually if I back up for a sec, if you like what we do coming right out of the box, just hit render and you're done. If you don't quite like what we're doing and you want to fine tune and go through the process I just showed, please do that to your heart's content and then hit render. And if you are in the advanced only version, so we have this repair assistant in the standard and advanced versions, but only the advanced version has this open module chain feature. This is everything that's been set through Repair Assistant. And then if you really want to go in and fine tune, because maybe you're used to working in a particular way, go in and select any one of these things, put in your desirable settings, and then render from that point on. So I think that's pretty much what I want to show there. There's a couple of other buttons too. We have a sort of reset state. So this now reflects the changes I made, but if you want to go back to what the software gave you, click this one and it resets to the first learned version that the software did the very beginning of the demo when I clicked it. This is back to what the software selected. And if you want to go back to default settings, you've got this button up here that takes you back to kind of where we have this thing waiting before you give it an input. The one last thing I'll say, and then ask if there are any questions, is for the first time since we released this, we now have a standalone plugin version, which looks pretty much exactly like this, except for one thing. It has metering in this porthole, which is in some ways probably better delivered for us in a plugin setting than it is in the application, just for stuff that's happening under the hood. But if you wanted to take Repair Assistant into your DAW of choice, you could do that. It's working on, it's supporting VST3 and AU. And at the moment in Pro Tools, it is only an audio suite version. I'm hoping we can get to a real-time version down the road. But it works in your DAW of choice as a plugin right where you want it. Or if you prefer to work here in the standalone editor, both in standard and advanced, you can use it there and kind of work however best serves you at this point, because we did not have a plugin version of Repair Assistant before. And as of yesterday, we now have Repair Assistant as a plugin, as well as this version in the application. So Wendy, I'll throw to you for a sec if there's any questions or anything we want to bring up.
Very cool. I got a couple here. Will it be possible to find in the coming versions words or phonemes within a specific production audio folder instead of only an audio clip?
Wow, that's a great question. No, I don't. We don't have that on a roadmap. I would love to know. I might even say you could reach out to me and let me know a little bit more about what you're looking for there. We've got nothing planned like that, but that really is intriguing to me. I'd love to. I literally will leave my email behind. It's mrozett@izotope.com. I would love to hear more about that. That's really interesting to me. But no,
Okay.
no plans for that.
Okay, and that was Daniel. Oh, it just popped away. Cabrera, I think it was. Okay, so here's an anonymous attendee. Can you adjust the DS's or the DS frequency?
We have this pretty much set to be very simple out of the box. So you can't do it here. But if you wanted to bring up DS in module chain and you really wanted to do some real fine tuning, you could do it there, and you could access it that way. And again, open module chains only in the advanced version, but that's where you would do that if you really wanted to get much more specific. This is designed to be a lot more, I would say honestly, quick and dirty with some ability to tweak, and then to go really deep as a pro user, dig into module chain, and you could do stuff there.
Got it. Totally. And then Mark Lanza asks, can you save your settings for another session?
From Repair Assistant?
I think that's what it was for.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm assuming it's just this, but yeah, you can. You can save settings. The easiest way to do it probably is to save as a module chain if you want to do that. I don't think we really have. We have not done much with sort of presets with this, which is typically where people might want to save some things. And the reason for that is part of the way we've been sort of telling the story and frankly marketing it is it's supposed to be sort of tailor-made for every for everything you bring up each time. So we haven't spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the preset structure would be for that, because generally people have been telling us sort of in our testing that they want to use it sort of uniquely each time they need it. But I would say module chain would be the best way to maintain some settings.
Okay. And here's a question again from an anonymous. Can you toggle between your tweaks and what it automatically came up with? I think you showed us that.
Yeah, let me do that.
Okay.
Let's do this. What I want to do, just because I was playing around with it, let me just relearn again, start fresh, and then I pretty much know what I've done because it's generally pretty consistent when I'm demoing this. So let me go back to, this is going to be what the software decides to do. And then I'm going to do roughly the same tweaks that I did before, which is generally to push the noise up a bit and clicking. And I usually go a little hotter on the S's. So here's the preview of the software.
As I never saw my father or my mother, and never saw any likeness of either of them, for their days were long before the days of photographs. As I never
And
saw
that's
my
without-
father or my mother, and never saw any likeness of either of them, for their days were long before the days of photographs. As I never saw my father or my mother,
Then
and never
that was sort of with my stuff, and then I will reset to what it decided and preview that.
As I never saw my father or my mother, and never saw any likeness of either of them, for their days were long before the days of photographs. As I never saw my father or my mother, and never saw any likeness of either of them, for their days were long before the days of photographs.
Did that cover that? Was that enough rolling through that? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, I think that, yep.
Okay.
I think that worked. And then this one, can you then change the order? I think it means of the module chain. Does that?
Yeah, that's a
Does that
great
make-
question. In the context of the repair assistant itself here, no. This chain you can't. You can turn things on and off by using the power buttons, and you can certainly set your levels. But if you get to the point where you really want to take where we started and do something else, you're best to go to open module chain and then switch, over here by dragging and dropping the order that module chain starts off in. So this is what we've done. Make any changes you want and drag and drop the components here in the module chain to whatever order you think is best.
Okay, and Megan Thomas asks, per the previous question, and I think this is a few questions ago, could the feature be combined with an editing tool that does transcription? Oh, I guess she's speaking about the one you showed us before this one, Megan, is that?
Oh, for text navigation?
Yeah.
I'm assuming. Yeah, one of the things, at the moment, we're kind of standalone with our text navigation, but one of the things that came up sort of towards the end of our beta testing, and something I hope we can get to probably for the next update version, is the ability to bring in a transcript. So folks have asked us about that. We would need to do some work on that, but I think we're going to probably head that way, because in a lot of cases, folks who are editing at the professional level of documentary, they typically have a transcript. Professional podcast editing, there's a transcript. Certainly, if you're working on a section that's of any length in dialogue, and you're bringing something over here, you're going to have, you'll have the script. So we're looking at ways to bring that in so that speech to text is something you can run here if you have no resources. But if you've already got your transcription resource, it would be really ideal for you to be able to bring it in and sync it up. So we don't have that yet, assuming that's where this question is going, but that's something we really do want to bring in. And that's something that our testers were asking us for.
Okay, and then I think back to the module chain question. I think this is related to that. It said, yes, but when you reset, can you go back? Does that mean anything to you?
When you reset the module chain?
I wonder if that's what.
Well, let me see let me do my best on this one, Wendy. I think in Repair Assistant, if you've come in and learned on Repair Assistant and we've captured a profile, you can change it to your heart's content. You can put it in module chain. You can export it. If you still want to go back to the learned state, we have that returned button that's right next to the modes, and that will bring you back to what was learned. And that's one way to get back to sort of where the software started, assuming that's what folks were asking. So there is a way to get back to the initial profile. So change as much as you want, render, do whatever you want. And then if you want to go back to the original, you can hit that reverse clockwise return button, and it will bring you back to where we started.
So this was the follow-up: reset tweaks, then go back to what was learned, then go back to your adjustments toggle.
Yeah, so you have a learned profile, then you make your adjustments. If you then decide you don't like your adjustments, you want to go back to the original, you can go back to the original. But at that point, you cannot go back to anything you had tweaked. So you're basically making a commitment saying, if I've tweaked and I've liked it, I've rendered and I moved on. But if you then go and reset, it sets you back to the learned state, and you would have to redo your tweak settings again, because it erases them and goes back to the original computer, the computer learned state. So that's one thing with the workflow you'd want to be careful about. If you wanted to keep going back and forth, if you want to compare settings, you can use the compare function and just kind of stack them up and decide which one you like the best. But once you reset back to the learned state, you've erased the tweaks that you've made, basically.
Got it. Okay. I think that wraps it up. One quick question that Danielle has been asking. The D-Reverb, is that sold by itself?
The D-Reverb is generally bundled. It's part of RX, but you, in the Element SKU, the thing I was talking about is our very entry-level SKU, there is a standalone, you get 6 plugins. One of those is D-Reverb. So that's where you could kind of get it as a plugin package. But if you buy RX Advanced, and frankly, I'm spacing right now if it's also in Standard, I would have to check that in the SKU list, but it comes bundled with the standalone editor.
And will that have an Atmos implementation?
RX overall supports up to 10 channels. It doesn't work with every single piece of processing. Some things are kind of defeated because they were never designed to work at an Atmos level. Some of them, for example, were just designed to kind of do cleanups at a mono or stereo level. So you could bring in a 7.1.2 file into RX and we'll recognize it. And then if you want to work on the different tracks, or the channels, I should say, of an Atmos mix, you can do that. But I can't say that every piece of our processing is optimized for that workflow. Some things won't work with it.
Okay.
So generally speaking, you can bring stuff up and you can do cleanups by track and you can target processing by track. But there are a few instances where, like D-Bleed, I don't think can work across Atmos, for example. Not everything will be able to handle it.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to let you move on to the next one.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Wendy. Thanks for the questions, everybody. They're great questions. I really appreciate them. So in this case, so let me start over. So now we're jumping over to Spectral Recovery. And this processing was designed a couple of versions ago to take a piece of audio that has massive bandwidth limiting on it. In this case, we've got something that's basically capped at 5K, and be able to use artificial intelligence, or specifically machine learning, to be able to analyze, what's down here in present, and then figure out what should be redrawn up here. For this new version of Spectral Recovery, we have completely gutted and totally reworked basically the artificial intelligence, what we call neural nets. They're the brains part of machine learning. And you basically take lots and lots of samples of bandwidth audio, and then you take samples of audio that has all of the bandwidth you'd like, and you train it a bunch of computers over, sometimes we'll rent computers and we'll run it for about a week. The software begins to recognize patterns. And the patterns in this case, and this is super simplistic, and I am not a software engineer, but basically it will say, okay, I understand the structure from 0 to 5K. And now that I've been trained on sort of what the frequencies look like above that, I can make educated guesses as to, when I look at this material, what's missing and what should I redraw. That's a basic idea between machine learning and in the audio repair world. Same thing with something like dialogue isolate. We've trained the processing on thousands and thousands of samples of clean speech and thousands of samples of speech with lots of background noise. If you run it long enough, you learn the patterns of what's different between noise and what's different between clean speech, and then you can bake that into the software. And again, that's the neural net, that's part of the software algorithm. So with that somewhat long setup, this has new neural nets. And so let me give you a sense of what we're dealing with and then kind of show you what it can do and how to use it. So this is a Zoom call.
trade-offs because you never don't have
Play it one more
trade-offs.
time.
And then we'll talk a little bit about trade-offs because you never don't have trade-offs.
So you can see we're pretty limited in what we've got there. With the new version of Spectral Recovery, we have substantially better high frequency resynthesis than the first version, and I'll show you that. But now we also have low frequency resynthesis, which we didn't have before. And so clearly, you're missing a ton up here and we need to redraw that. But if you're looking at the low end here, you can see that we're losing intensity at the bottom, like it begins to get kind of weak down here. And so that may be an area that we want to work on as well. So the way to use this is the first thing you probably want to do here is check spectral patching, which I leave on. What spectral patching does is it looks for gaps between the low frequency cutoff and the high frequency cutoff. It looks for gaps that are due to things like compression, which can happen, if you're recording on an iPhone or if you've got a Zoom call. And you can see there are these sort of areas where it looks like we've almost got nothing in the spectrogram. So this works to varying degrees. It's fairly subtle. Sometimes you see what it's doing more than you're hearing it. But in some ways, it's kind of a reference point to make sure that you're not leaving things that could be a problem later. So you check off spectral patching. And then the way this works is you just click Learn. And it gets a profile in there that can then be applied to this audio. So what I want to do is play. Let me see if I can get this through. There we go. Sorry, I should have brought this up as compare. Learning it, and I'm going to show it in compare. So here is the original again, and I'm going to switch over to the Learn profile.
A little bit about trade-offs.
Oops, sorry, folks. There we go.
And then we'll talk a little bit about trade-offs because you never don't have trade-offs. And then we'll talk a little bit about trade-offs because you never don't have trade-offs. And then we'll talk a little bit about trade-offs.
It's done what I
you
described.
never don't have trade-offs.
It's added in the upper high
And then we'll
end.
talk a little bit about trade-offs because you never don't have trade-offs.
But what I feel like, and again, I've played with this audio a lot, I feel like the upper end may be potentially it's getting a little wispy. If you really push this, if this gain were really up to this level, you'll start to hear that you're really overcompensating, like we're kind of redrawing too much stuff, and you don't want to do that. So I like to back this off. Let's just call it around -8 or 9 is probably a good place for the high end. I agree with where it drew the line because we had a super hard cutoff at 5K and it picked that up immediately. But I'm kind of thinking that maybe the low end could use a little bit of help. So I'm going to bring this up a little bit. I've been playing around by bringing it up to like 100 hertz, but I'll go a little mellower. Do that, and then I'll leave the gain where it is. But a note with any of these things, with great power comes great responsibility. As soon as you start getting aggressive with the low end, you all can guess what's going to happen. You're going to add mud and boominess to it. So you want to be careful about that. So I'm going to go a little bit light on the low end. I've already backed a tiny bit off on the high end. And now I'm going to run a compare pass and see how I like that. So I'll just take a moment to do that, and then we'll do kind of an ABC. So here's the original again.
About trade-offs because you never don't have trade-offs. And then we'll
I'll
talk
cut
a
over
little
to
bit
what I
about
just did.
trade-offs because you never don't have trade-offs. And then we'll talk a little bit about trade-offs because you
There's
never
a little more
don't
low,
have
and then
trade-offs.
here's what it
And
recommended.
then we'll talk a little bit about trade-offs because you never don't have trade-offs. And then we'll talk a little bit about trade-offs because you never don't have trade-offs.
So everybody's ears are different and everyone's projects are different, but I tend to want a little bit more out of the low end than maybe it comes up with. And we've kind of deferred to making sure we're not adding anything that's too boomy because that can really throw people. But like I said, for me and this sample, I've pushed it a little bit and then brought some low end back in. So it's a season to taste situation, of course. And always, as you all do, use your ears with the processing. You want to watch out again for going too aggressive on the gain. You'll hear it right away. But somewhere sort of in this range is generally what seems to be working a lot for, or working pretty well for Zoom calls and voice over IP stuff. Going after the major stuff that's clearly missing at the top, and playing around somewhere here in the low end with being careful on the gain to bring up some of the warmth. And if you get your balance right, you've now got some of the clarity and the crispness, which was missing on the upper frequencies. And you brought back a little bit of the warmth and maybe the fullness that was missing on the lower end. And so that's basically what we've got here. We've streamlined it so that we had 3 or 4 more parameters in the first version but we feel like we don't need those anymore with the new neural nets. And we've tried to really streamline it and make it simple and fast for folks. So Wendy, I think that's it for Spectral Recovery. I'll open up for any thoughts or questions.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have two quick ones and then we only have a few minutes. So
Okay.
let's do, can you do the same to imitate a microphone pickup pattern and place that over a clip like Sennheiser 416 versus RE16 actual recording?
Wow. Awesome question. We don't have any presets to mimic mics at this point, but if you're somebody who really knows your mics and you know what the performance pattern is of that microphone, you are able to dial things in. I mean, we've got a little bit of a frequency gauge down here at the bottom. You might be able to dial in what is effectively like the high end or almost a little bit of the roll-off effect, but we're not really optimized. It's a great question, though. We're not really optimized to bring in a particular pattern, at least to draw it in Spectral Recovery, if I'm understanding that question right.
Okay, and then Mark Lanz is asking, it introduced a ringing. Can you see it in the visual? Is that usual?
Yeah, that can sometimes happen with re-synthesized frequencies, and I'm probably pushing things kind of hot here just for Zoom and demo purposes. So you'd want to be a little bit careful with that. As you probably know from our de-hum processing too, there can be some ringing when you're pulling stuff out. So with the de-hum, you can select a lot more bands to use, go all the way up to 1,000 plus in the dynamic mode, and it helps you out there. But this one, I think the best thing to do here is to just probably apply things more lightly, because there's nothing specific that I can point to as a parameter that would help you dial it back. So I think it's just generally apply carefully or apply less strongly.
Okay, and did you have one more module that you wanted to show us?
Yeah, I can do this. I can do this in 30 seconds.
All right, let's
kidding.
do it.
Very quickly, with de-hum, and I'll just show this visually, and I won't really bother to play it because I realize people probably have their lives to get back to. And thank you for sticking with me this long. We added this dynamic mode last time, which is the thing I was just describing. It's puts up over 1,000 sort of like notches, essentially like tiny little mini compressors or noise gates. You can dial up as many as you want here. The new addition, and this is why this is a quick demo, is you no longer have to go through all of this to tackle multiple bands of hum or hum that changes pitch over time. All you have to do with this processing now is show up, select your audio or the section, click adaptive, and hit render. And that's all you have to do now. And it will take the hum out for you. Should you ever want to go back to tuning it up the old way, you can go back to dynamic, you can make your selection, you can learn on it, and then you can tweak it. And then you could go back to adaptive mode now and just apply those settings if you want. But literally all you have to do is open de-hum, select your audio, click adaptive and render, and it will take care of multi-band hum. And again, hum that changes pitch over time. So I will, that's pretty much the 4 things I wanted to cover, Wendy. So I think I can leave it at that.
You did that great. That was right on time. Here we are. So one quick question, which we may have already covered, but will RX10 come with the EQ match module, or will it still only work as a Pro Tools plugin?
We haven't made any changes to EQ match as it is. So it's still basically in the module list in RX. There is and we haven't done any real work on that. That is actually something we're teeing up for the next version, just to let you know, but nothing really new to report there.
Okay, well, I am getting lots of feedback, thanking you, lots of thank yous for showing all this amazing stuff, Mike. Really amazing stuff. And the fact that you guys did all that with 11 months, not even a year, it's crazy. So a well-deserved vacation for you. Thank you for showing. I feel so lucky that we got to see this like right after it was released. So it means a lot to us that you brought this to LAPPG. Thank you so much. And as you can tell, our members, they have lots of good questions. So we're hungry and we want to know stuff. So you always have a place to come and show us all the cool RX stuff. So thank you. And thank you to everybody at home for being with us. Also, catch up on our past meetings on our YouTube channel. We have about 75, almost 80 videos on there. The newest one is Remote Workflows with AJA, and that was from our June meeting. And that's when we celebrated our 14th anniversary with an informative presentation from AJA Director of Product Marketing, Bryce Button. Bryce was amazing. He introduced us to the new Hilo Plus, very cool product. And make sure that when you go to our channel, hit subscribe and hit the bell icon, and then you'll be notified at when our next videos drop. And don't forget to connect with us at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Use the hashtag LAPPG. And a huge thank you to our partners. We have our platinum level partner, AJA Video Systems, our gold partners, Adobe, Blackmagic Design, OWC, Zeiss, and Frame.io. And also our silver partner, iZotope, SGO, Reduct, Teradek, and Small HD. And it does take a village. We have supporting media and community partners as well who get the word out for us, and we let you know what's going on with them. All right, everybody, have a good evening, and thanks again for joining us.